Hello and welcome to Press TV News Analysis. I'm Kavit Hafei. For years, PJAK, deemed a terrorist group internationally, has launched attacks against Iran, operating out of Iraq's Kurdistan region. But why has this armed conflict been going on for so long? And why would Iraq, a country with friendly relations with Iran, allow this to happen? Just some of the questions we'll be asking our guests in this edition of Press TV News Analysis, along with what role the West is playing in the matter.
Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, the IRGC, says its troops have dealt a heavy blow to PJAK terrorists. It says a large number of PJAK terrorists have been killed and captured during the fighting that erupted after the Iranian forces repelled several armed attacks by the Iraq-based militants. Iran has said it reserves the right to attack and destroy terrorist bases on the other side of the border, since Iraq has failed to deal with them. PJAK is responsible for assassinating several Iranian officials and bomb attacks in the western regions of the country. PJAK is an offshoot of Kurdistan Workers Party, the PKK, which is considered a terrorist group by much of the international community. PJAK and PKK both have bases in Iraq and launch terror attacks against targets inside Iran and Turkey from there. Another terrorist group, Mujahideen Khalq Organization, or MKO, has for decades been using Iraqi territory as a launchpad for its attacks against Iran. MKO is responsible for a range of deadly terrorist attacks that have claimed the lives of thousands of Iranians, including top officials. MKO is notorious for its complicit involvement in 2 mass slaughters of Iraqi people during former dictator Saddam Hussein's rule. After Saddam's ouster in 2003, the Iraqi government has promised to curb the activities of PJAK and MKO, a commitment it has so far failed to carry out. And the US, which is occupying Iraq, has also turned a blind eye to the terrorist activities of the groups, although it claims to be the flag bearer of the international war on terror.
Let's try to find out what the goals are behind this group. We have our guest from San Antonio, Mark Dankov, who joins us. He's an investigative journalist. Also from London, we have Dr. Jafar Hassan, who's a Middle East analyst. And rounding off the list from Irvine, California, we have Paul Shelton-Foote. He's a professor at the California State University. Gentlemen, thank you all. Let me go first to you, Paul Shelton-Foote. Why don't you tell us who PJAK is and what their goals are?
PJAK, as was mentioned in your report, is a branch of communist terrorists that include the PKK, same leadership. The only difference is one attacks Iran, one attacks Turkey, one attacks Syria. So they have existed throughout those regions for a number of reasons. One is strong American support, even though the American government denies it. It's been reported by Seymour Hersh in New Yorker. It's been reported by Laura Rosen in her War and Peace blog. They can deny it all they want, but we strongly support it. Independent journalists have gone through the region and videotaped all these communist terrorist groups, and they all admit they are working with the American government.
Mark Dankov, why don't you tell us?
They also have, of course, some...
No, go ahead, Paul Shelton-Foote, I'm sorry.
They also, of course, have strong support from Israel. What the American media doesn't bother to report is that one of the 2 branches of the Kurdish groups is a Jewish branch. There is a large Jewish population of Kurds both in Iraq and in Israel. There used to be a pipeline that went from Iraq to Israel. And so the Israelis have had Mossad members on the ground in Kurdistan. They have even tried to create a central bank in Kurdistan, and they have been manning the terrorist attacks and directing the terrorist workers and providing weapons. And so there's a very strong Israeli element in all of this.
Okay, you have the Israeli elements, you have the United States, even though they deny it, as you said, Paul Shelton-Foote, supporting this group. Mark Dankov, doesn't that go against the notion of the United States fighting terrorism and terrorist groups when they're, well, supporting, as Paul Schlottenfoot said, this group in particular?
Well, there's no question about it. You can go back to January of 1981 and the so-called Algiers Accord, where the United States committed itself to never intervening or interfering again in the internal affairs of Iran. Obviously, when you look at what's happened in the last 30 years, we have trampled all over the Algiers Accord, and our support for PJAK, our support for the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, and our support for Jindala is clearly evidence of the fact that we are perpetually intervening in Iran's business, engaging in acts of terror and cross-border incursions that are absolutely illegal and reprehensible. And it's a simple contraindication of everything that the American government claims to stand for.
Let's look at Iraq itself, Dr. Hassan. The media there and some members of the Iraqi parliament have said attacks by the Islamic Republic are, quote, a blatant violation of their territorial sovereignty. First of all, if you can tell us, is that a reflection of the Iraqi government as a whole?
Well, I think the Iraqi government, the central government, has no control on that area, on Kurdistan, to be honest. The control is under the regional Kurdistani government. This is why, of course, Iraq, the central government cannot do anything. And also, don't forget that Iraq is still occupied by American government. And the American government itself, beside Israel, they help these groups against Iran. Always helping. And don't forget, in 2009, Iran arrested 3 American infiltrated Iran, and they were accused of espionage. And 2 of them is still in prison. 1 of them released on bail. To be honest, the Iraqi government is a weak government now at this moment, and Kurdistan is almost autonomous government. They have the control on the border. I don't think Iraqi government on that part of Iraq cannot have any cannot have influence there. So
why?
Therefore, this is why Iraqi government cannot do anything.
Why?
It is not.
Why can they not do anything?
To do. Well, the area is under the control of Kurdistani regional government. This is why it cannot do anything. It is not because it doesn't want, because it cannot. Simple.
So does that give reason for Masoud Barzani, who's the head of Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdish region, which has come out providing basis to the group to launch attacks against Iran, something that they refuse to acknowledge even to the central Iraqi government?
Well, I mean, the regional government denies that there are any bases in there, as you know, whereas Iran says, no, there are bases. But anyway, there are groups fighting Iran in that area because the group admitted that some of the, admitted the fighting. And they said that they killed so many soldiers from the Iranian army. So
okay, so if we are talking about that region of Iraq, how about the MKO who is inside Iraq, in the capital? What can you say about that in terms of the control?
Yes, the Iraqi, I mean, you remember the Iraqi government attacked that base last month. And from time to time they attack them, and they are trying to prevent these people to attack Iran. This is what they say. And they are trying to push them out somewhere, and they asked the American government to take them from Iraq. I mean,
let me bring in Paul Schlottenfoot. Paul Schlottenfoot, if you can explain that to us in terms of the MKO inside Iraq, and then the government there not doing what should be done in many respects, and of course, based on our guest, Dr. Hassan, of PJAK, of which Barzani has complete control of that region, which our guest said is almost autonomous.
This goes back to September 2002 when President Bush spoke at the United Nations and the White House issued a background paper specifically mentioning the Mujahideen Khalq as a pretext for why we needed to go to war with Iraq. In 2003, American and coalition forces attacked Camp Ashraf, Iraq, and killed some of the terrorists there. They quickly settled, and we turned around and started using them to go inside Iran to kill Iranians. We have been using them as terrorist tools. The only question is who they work for. Terrorists exist because someone wants them to exist. Their headquarters is in Paris, France, because the French government wants them to exist. They have broadcasting facilities in England because England wants them to exist. Terrorism only exists because someone's paying the bills, and that includes America, France, and England.
Mark Dankoff, why don't you explain to us a situation based on your introspective here, because some are saying that, well, this is also part of the thinking behind the United States of a greater Middle East. Does that have, is that a factor in the scenario?
I think it is, and I think the Zionist connection in this is also very instructive. Bernard Lewis's roadmap for what should happen in the Middle East is particularly insightful here. It seems to me that when you look at American and Israeli interests, as the neoconservatives and the Zionists perceive that, there are a number of things that are going on here, and supporting groups like PJAK and the Mujahideen Khalq and Jindala are a part of it. It seems to me that other than the use of overt military force and the threat of overt military force and economic sanctions and supporting NGOs and politicians in Iran who are considered to be opponents of the regime, that supporting groups like PJAK and Jindala and the MEK serves a broader American and Zionist interest, and that is to take Iran and attempt to support tribalist movements and sectarian movements that would weaken the central government in Iran. It seems to me that this is going on with PJAK and the attempt to utilize them to stir up ethnic trouble involving Kurds. This certainly is going on with the kind of support that the United States is covertly giving to sectarian groups that I think would like to create tensions between Arabs and Persians within Iran. And clearly, when you start looking at the Azeris, and I understand there are 25 million Azeris within Iran, that PJAK has expressed an interest not simply in fomenting trouble against Tehran vis-a-vis the Kurdish route, but also trying to stir up trouble with the Azeris and the Arabs who live in Iran, again, to create tribal divisions, sectional divisions that would serve to weaken the central government in Iran if overt threats of military force and economic sanctions are not sufficient to do the job.
Dr. Hassan, one of the countries that we have not heard here is Saudi Arabia. It is said that they are financing, along with that, then Israel and Mossad agents, as our guests have pointed out, coming in there and training these PJAK soldiers, or whatever you want to call them. Is that correct? Saudi Arabia financing this?
Yes, well, it is possible. It is possible. Don't forget, there is a struggle, between the United States and Iran. Of course, in this, Israel and Saudi Arabia helping in this. It is possible that Saudi Arabia training these people, because we know the plan and the intention of Saudi Arabia towards Iran. These people, or these countries, Israel, United States, Saudi Arabia, they are fighting Iran together as a group, and they are planning against Iran because United States cannot strike Iran because of the nuclear project. So therefore, is doing these kind of activities and these kind of conspiracies against Iran, and probably these people, PJAK, part of that plan to fight Iran. And Iran and the United States has so many allies in the area, in the Middle East, and one of them is Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has the money with which can provide the training and help to these groups of people.
Paul Shelton-Foote, United States, Israel, we have Saudi Arabia, all are trying to push through financing and training this group to militarily get engaged, cause instability inside Iran. Does Iran have the right, therefore, to defend itself?
Yes, of course. I want to give you a specific example of Saudi financing. You can get Masoud Khotabandeh on a future show. He runs a website called IranInterlink.org. Last time I was in London, he told me that when he was at Camp Ashraf, Iraq, in a very high position in the Mujahideen Khalq, he personally supervised the receipt of a large shipment of gold bars from Saudi Arabia to the Mujahideen Khalq. And the agreement they made with the Saudis was they had to shave off the insignia that were on the markings that were on the gold bars so no one would know where the gold came from. He can personally verify he was there at their headquarters at Camp Ashraf, Iraq, and a large shipment of gold came in. The Saudis fund every terrorist organization they can imagine in the region.
Mark Dankoff, why don't you tell us what regional consequences this may have, because as we speak, this conflict, this armed conflict, is still going on. I mean, what are the chances of this spreading and involving other countries? We can talk about Turkey and Syria. They hold large Kurdish populations.
Well, I think the possibilities are endless in terms of an expansion of this conflict. And it seems to me that in terms of the neoconservatives in Washington and the Zionist regime in Israel, that that's exactly what they want, to create division, to foment unrest and instability, to fan the flames of sectarian strife, and where possible, to create even a false flag incident that could be blamed on Iran to justify further overt military action against your country. This is what I'm afraid of. I've been warning about this for 5, 6, 7 years now, Dr. Foote as well. And it seems to me that this is the ultimate game plan. So I have no good feelings about any of this. And,
so when is the balance going to be tipped towards that? When is that going to get tipped towards there being an actual all-out, perhaps, incursion, whether it's direct or indirect? In this case in point, obviously, we're talking about PJAK and what they are doing.
Who knows? I have no inside intelligence sources on this, but it seems to me that the dangers are obvious. And when you see repeated things going on in the Western media, including ex-CIA agent Robert Bayer's statements recently that he had information to the effect that the United States, either with or without Israel, could conceivably attack Iran as early as September. Whether or not this plays out that way remains to be seen. But clearly, I think the game plan is in view here, and that is to create a larger situation that can be used for another overt British, American, and Israeli intervention in the region. And I think Syria is at risk. Clearly, they're at risk, and more importantly, I think Iran is in danger. I don't think anyone questions this who's seriously looked at the problem.
It looks like Israel likes that September month, doesn't it, Mark Dankoff? Dr. Hassan, in 2010, 400 Israeli military trainers with PKK and PJAK have been cited to be trained. This was information provided by Iranian and Turkish intelligence. I mean, Israel is pretty much in fifth gear here when it comes to putting forward their motions of training, in this case, up to 400 of them being there training. What does that show in terms of the rapid speed of how they are moving forward?
Israel been involved for a long time in these activities. I mean, there were reports years ago that the Mossad has bases in Kurdistan, and I think still they have, and also some of the rebels they've been trained in Israel. So I'm not surprised that if Israel is helping in the military training, or in other training, or in planning, or Israel has interest in that. The main interest of Israel that the nuclear project in Iran should be seized. That is what Israel is planning for. And in fact, Israel is doing so many things in this context. And one of the things is helping these rebels. And this help has been going on for some time to go. I mean, it's not new. And probably Israel is not hiding this. It's very clear. So I am not surprised if Israel is training these people to attack Iran at all.
Okay, Paul Schadenfurt, do you think if there wasn't this quote-unquote interference, let's say, by the United States and Israel, as we mentioned, and of course Saudi Arabia, that this problem would perhaps been resolved regionally along with the neighbors of Iran, let's say Turkey and Syria, along with the local governments there in Baghdad?
Absolutely. There is no reason for these problems. A large percentage of Iraqis are actually Iranians who have been living in Iraq for more than 100 years. The borders of the Middle East were imposed on the Middle East after World War I by France, England, and the rest of the world. These are artificial lines. My wife has relatives buried in Iraq. My wife is from Iran. Who's to say that anyone else outside the region should be defining the lines and imposing these kind of conflicts on the region? The only objection to Iran is Iran finally has a government independent that stands up and will not tolerate having its oil stolen as it was under the Shah.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul Schadenfurt there, professor at California State University from Irvine. We appreciate your comments. Also like to thank Dr. Jafar Hassan, who's a Middle East analyst from London, and Mark Dankov, investigative journalist there from San Antonio, Texas. Thank you for your comments. And thank you, the viewer, for watching. Send us any questions or comments, newsroom@presstv.ir. It's the old-fashioned way. Do send us your opinion on this program. From Mika Vatawe and the entire team from Iran's capital, Tehran, it's goodbye.